Yes. Hello, my beautiful friends. What an amazing day it is. We have arrests out of Minnesota, and we're going to go through them. Apparently, one guy is still on the run. It jumped out of a 4-story building and is wanted by the feds. And so if you've seen him, give him a phone call. But we're going to learn who he is. I've got a bunch of documents queued up related to this. We've got an information charging one of the ladies in one of the Nick Shirley videos with more felonies for wire fraud and a conspiracy. We also have the guy Omar, not that Omar, another Omar out of Minnesota, who has also been charged with some hospice type Medicaid fraud. And we'll learn more about the woman, Amy Bach. She got sentenced today for 41 and a half years. That's a doozy. But she gave a very interesting interview last night where she learned about what the government's sentencing recommendation would be. And so I've got those two competing sentencing recommendations pulled up, her recommendation and the government's recommendation. And she went through this interview with this guy and said she's being made to be the scapegoat. She wasn't the mastermind. She ran a nonprofit, and every bit of money that she submitted for reimbursement went through a state agency. And so she's ultimately fingering guys like Tim Walz and Keith Ellison, the attorney general, who knew about all of this and enabled the fraud for years. And so, bunch of Minnesota stuff today. Very glad that you're with us. We're going to look at some good documents and wrap our brains around this fraud and see why they're singling out, up until today, this one woman without going after the real enablers, people like Ilhan Omar, Tim Walz, and the Attorney General of the state, Keith Ellison. So all coming up. Let's make sure that the tubes are connected before we dive on into the materials on the day. It's working. That's tremendous news. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Oh, man, sometimes this happens, and it always happens right when we go live. It is, of course, a frozen desktop. So let me just swap this over here and swap it on back. There we go. This is where we want to start right here today. Fleeing felon in Minnesota, now on the run, been charged with crimes in a major roundup taking place targeting all of the fraudsters out there. 15 people in total now charged with the frauding government social service programs. And we're going to look at the charging documents as it relates to this guy in particular. But the FBI is saying, if you have seen this man, call 1-800-CALL-FBI or just go over to the website. We had a full press briefing here today, and this guy who's on the run is named Mohammed Omar. Fox 9 reporting that officials said that one of the suspects is on the run, saying he leaped from a 4th-story balcony as authorities tried to arrest him this morning. They identified him, court records that we're going to take a look at. We've got the full docket here pulled up. His name is Omar, I know. Not that one. Maybe she'll get indicted later. But here's the indictment that came down for this guy and somebody else called Ibrahim Bashir Abdi out of the District of Minnesota. We'll come back to that. But now he is running away. They say he worked with another guy to create a healthcare center, opened up multiple companies registered for the housing stabilization program, and then they pocketed $3.2 million, which of course is why he doesn't want to get caught. And you know what's so curious about all this is apparently he has property in Kenya. So we'll see if we can ever track this dude down or if he's already on a boat or an airplane heading back home to Kenya. So here's the background. Of course, the DOJ was out today and they were telling us exactly who this guy is and what happened. We'll listen in before we check the charges.
Before I begin my crux of my remarks, I need your help. On the screen, you will see a subject. Depicted on the screen here of an individual who was a target of the investigation this morning. That individual is currently on the run after having jumped out of a 4th-story balcony. I want you to get a good look at him right now. You'll see him. You'll see him running here. He is currently on the run. We need your help.
Oh no, broken ankle.
This individual, if you know this individual, if you can provide any information related to this individual, I would encourage you to call 1-800 call FBI, CALL FBI, or go to the internet at www.tips.fbi.gov or call your local law enforcement.
And it's weird. I would have thought that if he was doing honorable work, then he wouldn't be fleeing when the FBI knocks on his door. But that's what happens after you pocket $3 million plus. You jump out of a building and apparently either sprain or break your ankle. So if he's trying to sprint away from the feds, he's got a bum foot. But maybe he'll have some help. So all that broke today. And we now know that the charges against this guy are as follows, saying that a grand jury, and this was submitted on the 12th, we're getting a lot of this. There were 15 of them total, so they're all starting to percolate out onto the docket, saying this, of course, is about this guy. Medicaid was a health and long-term care coverage program that was jointly financed by state and federal governments pursuant to the Social Security Act of 1965. It allows people who meet certain requirements to get care. The CMS, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, a federal agency, was responsible for overseeing all of this. Now, people who get these benefits are called recipients. Makes sense. And Medicaid was a health care benefit program. Each state, including Minnesota, established and administered its own Medicaid programs and determined the type, duration, amount, scope of services, and more within federal guidelines. And the way it works is Medicaid covered the cost of medical services and other products ranging from routine preventative medical care for children to institutional care for the elderly and the disabled. Service providers were authorized to submit claims to Medicaid only for services that were actually rendered, actually provided. And they're required to maintain patient records, among other things. You submit a claim, the provider certifies things, saying it's medically necessary, and it goes to this particular patient. You're not allowed to get kickbacks or bribes. But here's what happened in Little Somalia. Beginning in or around July 2020, right in the middle of COVID, Homeland DHS began operating Housing Stabilization Services, HSS programs, which was funded through the state's Medicaid program. The program was designed to help seniors and people with disabilities, including mental illnesses and substance use disorders, find and maintain housing. The program permitted reimbursements from 4 kinds of services: housing consultations, and it required certain information, and then you could bill $174 for a consultation for housing. You could also have housing transition, during which a provider helped a recipient plan for or find and move into housing. Providers could also bill $68 per hour of transition services. Now, also housing sustaining services, during which a provider helped a recipient keep their housing after they had moved in. Providers could bill $68 per hour for that. That's good money, man. $68 an hour. Moving expenses of up to $3,000 as well, subject to other conditions. And do most people need these things? Most people just get on Zillow or they go on apartments.com or whatever. But I guess maybe that's for English-speaking people. This is not for people who have invaded the country and then need all sorts of assistance transitioning and doing these basic tasks for living life, like finding a place to live. Now, the program had the following requirements to enroll. Got to be 18 years old, submit an application, undergo a background check, complete approximately 5 hours of online training. The program had the following requirements to enroll: 18 years, have Medicaid coverage, have a documented disability, and be experiencing housing instability. To get billable services, a recipient meeting these requirements was required to complete a form called a housing plan, detailed that also includes what their challenges were and what their needs are. And the government is going to help you get it all. So once submitted, the recipient could then enroll with the provider, and the provider could start billing the program $68 a clip an hour. So to bill then, the provider submitted the names of the recipient, they got the services, the type of service provided, and the number of hours worked, which is what brings us to Mohammed Omar and Ibrahim Abdi. One of them a fleeing felon jumping out of windows. They created a company, an LLC, called North Home Healthcare, LLC. And Omar also owned and operated another one, South Home Healthcare LLC. Wow, really creative names. So one in the north, one in the south. Then in June 2022, Omar and Abdi formed NHHC, the North one. In August 22, they submitted a provider agreement to enroll their company as a provider in Minnesota healthcare. Operated, and I think it's DHS, this is the Department of Health Services in Minnesota, not to be confused, which we often do here, with Homeland Security at the federal level. They then represented to the state provider in a profile report their equal owners, and they were responsible of the submission of the claims. Then in April 23, Omar formed the South one. Same thing, provided another agreement, and they were both responsible. In the process of enrolling in these, they certified on a document that they would not submit false or fraudulent claims. We're not going to lie to you and exploit you. Of course not. Come on in. So they then completed the mandatory training, I'm sure. And although they were supposed to provide housing consultations, transitioning and sustaining services to qualifying people, they were paid at quarter hourly rates in Medicaid dollars based on the services that they claim to provide. Here's where the scheme starts. From in or around June 22 all the way until April, in Minnesota and elsewhere, they did knowingly devise and participate in a scheme and artifice to defraud a healthcare benefit program by means of false pretenses. It was the purpose of this scheme to enrich themselves. They submitted and caused the submission of fraudulent claims. They inflated the number of hours of the services that actually were provided, and then in other billings, they did not actually provide anything. They also billed for services for which they could not be reimbursed. They concealed the submission of false and fraudulent claims and the receipt of the fraudulent funds. They diverted proceeds of the fraud for personal use to their own benefit and to further the scheme. Now, the manner and means by which they did this is the following. In August 22, Omar signed a provider agreement. He said, I'm the owner of this organization, and he represented that the company would submit accurate claims, refund overpayments for anything that was fraudulent, maintain records that were disclosed, and more. He signed these agreements in or around March 23 and again in February 24. Now, during the 23 agreement, he said he would submit accurate claims, refund overpayments, and follow the rules. Then we go back a little bit. In November 22, they also opened up a business checking account, JP Morgan Chase, of course. And they opened a second business account, one ending in 7809. These accounts were created in order to receive the reimbursements. Similarly, in September, they opened two business checking accounts, 75258656, and others, including DHS, paid into these accounts for all of their claims. Omar was the sole signatory on these accounts. Now, they then hired, quote, housing coordinators to purportedly provide housing services. Omar and Abdi knowingly submitted and directed others to submit claims to Medicaid and others for services when, in fact, the assigned housing coordinators were documented as providing services to multiple recipients at the same time. Now, they knowingly and willfully also submitted and directed others to submit claims for the identical number of hours every few days when, in fact, those services were not provided or significantly inflated. So basically, just taking the same sheets, the same forms, you know, how like you have an employee up 8 hours a day. Did you really work 8 hours? Yes, 8 hours. Yes, 8 hours. Yes, 8 hours. Then between in or around August 24 and all the way through 25, a compliance manager at one of these complained to Omar and Abdi that housing coordinators did not actually meet the Medicaid recipients or even meet with them as required. You're not actually doing your work. They failed to communicate with the recipients, the people receiving the services. They did not provide services to those recipients. And despite all of those complaints, they did not alter their billing practices at all. They continued to submit these claims for more services than were provided and for services that they did not provide. And the story continues on. Now, you see some details here. Program claims of 92 hours were provided to a Medicaid recipient after the guy died. He's dead. We can't give him any services. Well, how dead is he? Like dead. All right. Well, we can hit him again for another couple of weeks. Omar and Abdi created other records falsifying the services that they claim to be providing, sent that to insurers, sent that to auditors, more false and fraudulent claims. They also falsified case notes describing their services that they handed out. From then, 2022, all the way to through 2025, they billed Minnesota Medicaid, look at that number, $3.3 million. And they got $3.2 million based on those false claims. Same story from 23 to 25. They also billed Medicaid approximately $490,000 for more recipients, and they got $480,000. Now, what happened, of course, is Omar took 150 G's and he bought real estate in Nairobi, Kenya, which is probably where he's going right now. Over $60,000 also to lease a Mercedes-Benz, because you got to look good while you're committing fraud. He also used $20,000 of the proceeds from the program to also, Abdi, buy another little place over there in Nairobi, Kenya. And that's like not that much. So first guy is going to spend 150 G's. This other guy's like, well, I'll just get something small over there, just 20,000. So, of course, multiple charges, conspiracy, saying between these dates, 22 and 25, they willfully conspired and executed their attempt to fraudulently misrepresent what they were doing to defraud Medicaid. Counts 2 through 5, various healthcare fraud charges. And again, here are some of the charges here. They billed multiple dates of the approximate service, approximate amount claimed, 137. Here, multiple dates on that one, $824, another 137. And so they would just, I would imagine, I mean, that's a lot of dates of service. So just fraud going up to $3 million. What a joke. So forfeiture allegations, all of that brought by a grand jury, and they've been indicted, which is why this guy had to jump out of a window 4 stories high, saying these things have gotten out of control. Now, there was more from the press briefing here today. He said, from AG Colin McDonald, today we are announcing criminal charges against 15 other people, 14 plus that guy, for fraud schemes targeting over $90 million in taxpayer funds. This is the beginning of our work, and the fraud here is shocking. Here's what he had to say.
Today, we are announcing criminal charges against 15 defendants in Minnesota for fraud schemes that targeted over $90 million in taxpayer dollars. Let me be clear up front about something. This is not the end of our work in Minnesota. This is not the end of the beginning of our work in Minnesota. This is the beginning of our work in Minnesota. The fraud here in Minnesota is shocking. Our cases today involve 7 different state-managed Medicaid programs that have been systematically pilfered by fraudsters who treated Minnesota-run programs as their personal piggy bank. One of the programs has been completely shut down because there's no money left. It's all gone. That was Minnesota's state-run Housing Stabilization Services Program, designed to help the homeless find and maintain housing. It was estimated in 2020 that it would cost only about $2.5 million a year to fund this program, but it ended up costing almost 50 times that much, over $104 million by 2024 due to fraud. And because of all the fraud, Minnesota had to shut the program down in 2025, and now these services no longer exist for these vulnerable homeless populations. The same trends exist for other Minnesota-run taxpayer-funded programs. An autism program that cost the taxpayer $600,000 just 6 years ago skyrocketed to over $400 million.
Insane.
And to be sure, that number is not driven by supply and demand. It is not driven by health care or charity. It is fraud.
Hundreds of millions of dollars of autistic kids just popped out of nowhere. And the Somalis are now ransacking it and going back to Kenya, according to this one particular charge. So we also saw that Secretary Kennedy was there, Dr. Oz were there, and it was a full-blown administrative show up today. Here's what RFK Jr. had to say.
This is an extraordinary bust today because these kind of operations usually take many years, sometimes a decade. This was executed with a precision and speed that is unprecedented in the history of law enforcement. And it's unprecedented now, but under Vice President Vance's leadership and President Trump's direction, we are going to normalize this speed. We're restoring accountability, strengthening oversight, prosecuting criminal networks, and protecting the integrity of our public health systems. We will not allow criminals to treat children as billing opportunities while American taxpayers foot the bill. This administration will continue rooting out fraud because every stolen dollar is a dollar taken from a child, a parent, a senior of a family who desperately needs help.
And you can't really criticize, of course, if I guess you're a Minnesotan, it's like, why was this going on for so long? And apparently, if you would just say, oh, you can't come after all of this fraud, or else you're a racist, or else you're a bigot, or else you hate autistic kids, or what? You don't care about the homeless? So it goes from $600,000 to like $400 million. And everybody's just like, I guess maybe everyone's just getting rich. Everyone else is paying for it, but the people in it are like, well, you know, we need this. We're doing good work out there. So here's one more exchange. She said, today's charges are unprecedented. The highest loss amount ever charged in a Medicaid case happening here in Minnesota.
Make no mistake, today's charges are unprecedented. They include the highest loss amount ever charged in a Medicaid case in Minnesota and the largest autism fraud scheme ever charged by the Department of Justice. The common theme throughout these cases is fraudsters exploiting vulnerable programs and vulnerable people to enrich themselves, no matter the consequences to the programs or to the people. For example, one defendant is charged with defrauding the Integrated Community Supports Medicaid program. This program is designed to help individuals with disabilities live independently. One patient was supposed to be receiving 24-hour care through this program, but he was actually being serviced by a fraudster and received no services. This patient was later found dead. Meanwhile, the architect of this fraud scheme was...
What kind of people are these people? In addition to fraudsters, they're just letting people rot away and die? What kind of ethics, what kind of morality do they have? They're driving around in their Mercedes-Benz, taking trips back and forth to Kenya for real estate projects, as senior citizens and autistic kids are just dying, wasting away when they signed up for a program to get care. It's very dark, and they're doing it because they want to get rich.
Was billing Medicaid as if he was providing care to this patient. The defendant even submitted a claim of over $400 for services he never provided the day before this man died.
Sick.
In another example, two defendants have been charged for defrauding a program designed to offer medical services to those with autism spectrum disorder. As alleged, the defendants paid kickbacks to parents who brought their children to autism centers, diagnosed children with autism regardless of medical necessity, and billed for autism services that were never actually provided. In one final example, two defendants have been charged in an over $22 million fraud scheme involving the Individualized Home Supports Program. This program was meant to support disabled individuals who wanted to live in their own homes. Instead, these disabled individuals were used like lottery tickets by these defendants to generate millions of dollars, which these defendants used to expand their real estate holdings, purchase luxury vehicles, and splurge on expensive jewelry. We will not, full stop, tolerate this greed and deceit. We will not let fraudsters bankrupt Medicare and Medicaid the same way that they bankrupted the Housing Stabilization Services Program.
Yeah, and they must just come here and just say, these people are so stupid. Why are they giving us our new Mercedes, new properties in Kenya? And these were two dudes who billed $3 million. Do you know how hard you have to work to save $3 million? Hard, very hard. And it's now just being sent out. They send a bill for $3.3 million. Somebody over there at Minnesota Medicaid takes a look at it like, well, 3.3, that's a little high. How about 3.2? They're like, okay, I guess we'll take 3.2 million for total fraud. And so it will make your just skin crawl. The fact is that they're stealing money, but they're also stealing money from the people who need it. And we're a good country with good people. We want to take care of those who are disabled and those who are senior and homeless and autistic. And it ends up going to Mohammed Omar and somebody named Abdi, who apparently have more interest in property in Kenya than being good, honorable people at all. Welcoming them into our country with open arms. Well, some people are, not anymore, but welcoming them in, saying, oh, we'll help you because you're a refugee, you're TPS, come be a part of America, you contribute, blah, 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 all that crap we've all heard. Then they take millions of dollars and let people just rot away and die. So fortunately, Trump's in charge now. And he was commenting on some of this today. He said, you know, it's a pretty small percentage of the American population who's doing this. I don't think it really is most of American population that's doing this. It's foreign invader populations, people who say, well, I'm a citizen, and then turn around and do this to their fellow citizens. Doesn't being a citizen mean that you care about your countrymen, that you care about your country, that you care about your treasury, your finances, you're disabled, you're poor, you're tired, you're meek, all the things? Instead of just saying and acting like ransacking pirates who will board your ship, slit your throat, and throw you overboard, Trump says, well, it's not everybody. Good news about that is we can identify the people who are doing it, and that happened today.
And we moved over 5,000. And an interesting statistic is that 2% of the population creates 91% of the crime. And the reason I like that is that you can handle 2% of the population. Mr. Kroger, I see, do you have stores in Washington? You see a big difference?
We do.
Boy, you said the right thing. That would have been the end of Kroger. All right, okay, we'll do one or two more, please.
All right, so, yep, certain populations and certain individuals are more responsible than other populations and other individuals. Good news with that is, of course, you can identify those populations and do something about it. So 15 people, which is a good start. I'm sure this problem is way more pervasive than anything seen here. Now all being charged more than $90 million. And of course, we also know Amy Bach was sentenced to 42 years in prison. We'll come back to that one, but a good start. We're happy to see. And if you have seen this individual who is now a fleeing felon with a broken left leg or sprained ankle or something, wanted by the FBI, but he might be back in Kenya. So keep your eye out on this fella if you're at an airport. Call 1-800-CALL-FBI. All right, let's continue on. Now, there's more on this. We have another set of charges. A daycare owner in Minnesota also charged with more felonies for conspiracy to defraud America. Shocking, I know. But this lady showed up in one of those Nick Shirley videos that has been blowing the lid off this whole thing, and her photograph is right here. And we're going to learn more about her. She had already been charged with other crimes, but the DOJ came down in the case of United States versus Muhammad and hit her with the new set of charges. Her name is ultimately Fahima Ege Muhammad. Charged with the new set of documents that just dropped today, more felonies. The original complaint came back February 12th. And you can see as part of this expansion of the case, she also got hit with a new felony information, May 20th, all of this being reported here today, courtesy of the new DOJ that's no longer enabling this. And here's more on the story. So she was charged as part of another $4.6 million fraud scheme, also connected to the Feeding Our Future scandal that has Tim Walz, Keith Ellison, and Ilhan Omar's fingerprints all over the whole thing. And as happy as we are that these individuals are all getting rounded up now, we have to ask ourselves, who was enabling it? Who was handing out the cash? Who knew that the fraud was happening or should have known that the fraud was happening? Who was increasing the budget from $600,000 for autism to $400 million for autism? Who was making those decisions? And then when the submissions for reimbursement were being submitted, who was approving those in the federal government? This is like going after the drug dealers and the drug users, but not the drug manufacturers, the people who are actually at the top of the entire scam. So, of course, we're happy to see that she's been nailed. She's accused of pocketing millions of dollars meant for children's food. So the autistic kids, sorry. The senior citizens just sit there and rot and die. And the children just go hungry because who cares? Her name is Fahima Ege Mohammed. She was charged Wednesday with wire fraud and conspiracy to defraud the United States. Earlier, she was indicted for her alleged role in the Feeding Our Future scheme, as we saw. Prosecutors now say she enrolled Future Leaders Early Learning. Future Leaders Early Learning, and they got the N in on that one, so it wasn't exactly a Leering Center, although it was a Leering Center because they all are. A Minneapolis daycare where she was the CEO. She also was in putting them into the federal child nutrition program, falsely claiming to serve thousands of meals to the Leering kids. In addition to her involvement in the nutrition program fund, she was federally indicted and charged with a secondary scheme to defraud the Child Care Assistance Program, which provides daycare assistance to low-income families. Going back between 2022 and 2025, she allegedly submitted over 13,000 fraudulent claims. And it's like when those really problematic children, and a lot of the times it's the parents too. I've seen the videos where the parents walk up on Halloween, and you're a nice neighbor, so you put out a whole bucket of candy. You're not going to be home. You put out the whole bucket. Just take one, okay? Take one or two. And that one scumbag family shows up and dumps the whole friggin' pot into their little bag and then giggles and runs away. That's what this is. And or Black Friday, everybody runs in there. Everybody comes out with two big screens under their arms after trampling over each other. And then they all think that like they stuck one to the man or something. So she allegedly submitted over 13,000 fraudulent claims for $4.6 million. Just one lady, one organization. She's been accused of pocketing these millions. There's a photograph of her, Mohammed, and prosecutors state the claims were fraudulent. She falsely certified that she collected mandatory co-payments. It's a material requirement, and she never did. So this center was also featured in Nick Shirley's shout out viral video, which Fox 9 reported on. He visited an apparently empty Somali-run child daycare center in and around Minneapolis. And then, of course, everybody went, what the hell is going on over there? They also then, since this, froze $185 million to child care funding in Minnesota. And over 2,000 federal agents were deployed into the Twin Cities. And then they got thrown out of the Twin Cities because the Minnesotans organized insurgency groups. They created spreadsheets and computer programs to track the license plates, to immediately dispatch certain other people to go out and get in the faces of federal agents, to blow whistles in their eardrums, and to attack them, violently spitting on them, kicking the back of their cars in like Alex Preddy did. So it's almost like they want it to happen, maybe because they're all the beneficiaries of it, or because they're so brainwashed that they just call it fascism emerging in Minnesota. So the docket has now been populated, and here is the new information that is dropped. Once again, District of Minnesota. The defendant, Fahima Ege Mohammed, devised and carried out a scheme to defraud the federal child nutrition program. This was designed to provide free meals to starving kids. She exploited the changes in the program that were intended to ensure that underserved children got adequate nutrition back during COVID. putting the entire Halloween bucket into her bag to enrich herself by fraudulently misappropriating hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal child nutrition funds. Of course, she also devised and carried out a scheme to defraud another program, the Child Care Assistance Program, designed to provide daycare to low-income families. Here's the background. Food and Nutrition Service was an agency of the Department of Agriculture. They administered various nutrition programs for the youth. The Summer Food Service Program, another program to ensure children continue to get nutritious meals when school's not in session. And they reimbursed nonprofit organizations and other entities that served free, healthy meals and snacks to kids in low-income areas. Sounds like a good program. Well, oh, yeah, I'm a congressman. I'm going to bring, free, healthy meals to kids. Sounds good. Who's going to oppose that? Now, the Children and Adult Care Food Program was also another program that reimbursed, once again, nonprofits. And I think these are just all money laundering operations, ultimately. I'm sure some of them do good work, but it seemingly is a large portion of them just use them under false pretenses to launder money from the feds into their nonprofits. The nonprofits then create a Democratic constituency, which then votes for Democrats, who then backfill the programs, increase their funding so it can go from 600 Gs up to hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, the federal program operated and did go throughout the United States. Minnesota Department of Education administered this in Minnesota. Meals funded by the federal nutrition program were served at various sites, end quote. Each site participating in this program was required to be sponsored by an organization that authorized to participate in the program. Sponsors were required to submit an application to the education for each site. Sponsors were also responsible for monitoring each of their sites and preparing reimbursement claims for their sites. Sponsors submitted these claims to Minnesota on behalf of the sites under their sponsorship. Federal government then paid them reimbursement funds from the feds back over to Minnesota on a per meal basis. Minnesota provided the federal funds to the sponsoring agency, then they paid reimbursement to the various sites. The sponsoring agency retained 10 to 15% of the funds as an administrative fee in exchange for sponsoring the sites, submitting reimbursement claims, and dispersing the funds. Now, historically, the federal program provided meals to children involved in education-based programs or activities. During COVID, the USDA waived several of those standard requirements for the program. Among other things, they allowed for-profit restaurants to participate in the program. It also allowed food distribution to children outside of the educational programs. So if you're a hungry kid, come get fed. Sounds good until the Somalians figure it out. So here, the United States Department of Health and Human Services was a federal agency. The Administration for Children and Families, ACF, was an agency within HHS. ACF administered child care, provided grants to states for the purpose of reimbursing the child care providers. The state of Minnesota got those block grants through the CCAP, administered by Minnesota DHS and the Department of Youth. To be eligible for reimbursement, child care providers were required to be licensed and enrolled. The provider was also required to be registered in each county. Child care providers were informed of the requirements governing their participation. One of the requirements was that by both child care providers was the collection of co-payments. The co-payment was paid by the family's child care provider biweekly. The co-payment amount was based on family size and annual income. Co-payments were graduated to move families towards full payment of their child care costs as their income increased. So that acts as almost a safety check valve. So yeah, we'll give you some food. It's almost like a reduction in cost. You have to pay something, pay $1. We'll give you a $10 meal, pay $1. And it's a co-payment. Now, they then submitted their claims. In submitting the claims for reimbursement, the providers were required to certify that they got the co-payments, had waived it, or were owed a debt. Then Feeding Our Future comes onto the scene. Now, this was a nonprofit organization purportedly in the business of helping community partners. It was an approved sponsor from the federal program. Now, prior to the onset of COVID, Feeding Our Future was a small nonprofit that sponsored the participation of Minnesota daycares and after-school programs with the federal CNP program. Then in April, everybody thought, oh, this is our time. Feeding Our Future dramatically increased the number of sites under its sponsorship, as well as the amount of programs received by those sites. They went from receiving and dispersing wild numbers. $3.4 million in 2019. Look at these numbers, all the way up to $200 million in 2021. Gosh. Now, the defendant, Fahima, she was the CEO of Future Leaders Early Leering Center, a child care center in Minnesota. She was registered with the state of Minnesota in 2015. She also then participated in the federal program as a distribution site under the sponsorship of Feeding Our Future. As a distribution site, they were supposed to provide food and meals to kids. They would be reimbursed if the meals were provided. However, between January 21 and July 21, Fahima, she submitted $826,000 in reimbursement claims to Feeding Our Future for meals that she apparently fed out. During the same time period, again, she got $854,000 back. Now, through Future Leaders, Fahima Mohammed also submitted claims to CCAP for the reimbursement of child care services, not just the food, also purportedly provided according to law. As a provider, she was required to collect co-payments and certify that those co-payments had been received for those child care services. Between October 22 and December 25, she submitted over 13,000 claims to the program. Now, 6,100 of those claims were for services provided to recipients for whom a co-payment was required to be collected, and Future Leaders was reimbursed $4.6 million over about 3 years. So from 2020 December, right when, COVID has been going on for a while, we just had the election, all the way to March 23, they say she was in a scheme to defraud America. She knowingly devised a scheme and artifice, fraudulent pretenses, concealment of material facts, and more. A main purpose of this was to defraud and to obtain hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal money. As a food site operator, she was responsible for serving actual food, to actual kids. However, in furtherance of the scheme, what she did is she submitted to Feeding Our Future and to the Minnesota Department of Education. And so to be clear, the Feeding Our Future lady, she's busted, man. We're going to talk about her in the next segment. She's out. This lady also out. But it was going back to the Minnesota Department of Education. The major drug manufacturer was handing it to the distributor, Feeding Our Future, and then Muhammad would then cut up the drugs and then distribute it out. So it's a chain of command. And thus far, nobody in the government has been charged. The Feeding Our Future lady, she's busted, going to prison for a long time. Muhammad, we'll see what happens to her. But the people who approved all of these claims, nothing. Including she sent in fake meal counts, fake rosters, fake invoices with substantially inflated figures. Muhammad consequently received a bunch of money, the funds that substantially exceeded the amount of the food that she ultimately delivered in. Now, in October 2018, Feeding Our Future, which is this lady right here, Amy Bach, she was sending money, it sounds like, to Future Leaders, sponsored them, brought her under her umbrella as a food site. Then Muhammad purported to operate a food distribution site in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Now, from December 20 to July 21, Muhammad claimed to serve tens of thousands of meals to the kids. And it's crazy because all of this, of course, is trickling back up to the government. And the government is like, wow, we must be seeing like a million more kids. Like every single kid in Minnesota is being fed food from the program and nobody knew about it. Tim Walz is, by the way, passing budgets and having to account for all of this, all seeking reimbursement from the feds, watching these numbers. Everyone knows it's going on. Keith Ellison knows it's happening. Tim Walz knows it's happening. All of the directors throughout the entire chain of command, they all know it's happening, but they're all benefiting from it. Tens of thousands of meals each month. How many kids are coming through? In reality, her operations only served a fraction of those meals, obviously. Now, in furtherance of the scheme, Mohammed completed meal count sheets, falsely representing the number of meals served at the site each day. At times, she represented in those meal counts to be serving 2 meals a day to 1,000 kids 7 days a week. 1,000 kids? You know how many kids that is every single day? Like, think about your local school. How many kids are there? It's like a high school. You know, it's a ton of kids at one site. Like, just drive by the site. Are there people out the door lined up? Who's cooking all these meals? Mohammed signed those meal counts, and this is one of many, right? There's many others representing them to be accurate. However, as Mohammed knew, those meal counts were false and inflated. She then caused those counts to go back up to Feeding Our Future, and then Feeding Our Future submitted the fraudulent claims back up to MDE. MDE got the money from the federal treasury. Now, she also submitted to Feeding Our Future fraudulent invoices purporting to substantiate food purchased by her organization to feed children within the food program. Among Future Leaders' purported food vendors was a company called Alif Halal. Where was Alif Halal? Well, that was in Burnsville, Minnesota. So now she's got vendors and she needs some of that money to pay to her people. See how it just followed the bouncing ball down the chain of the fraudsters. That was Alif Halal. Well, who owned that one? This guy called Hoda Abdi. Who's that? Hoda Abdi provided Mohammed with false receipts from Alif Halal, purporting to document food purchased by Future Leaders. All fraud. Mohammed knew that the receipts were false and inflated, and even so, she sent those receipts back up to Feeding Our Future and said, I have to be reimbursed for these. So then she gets money from Feeding Our Future, pays off the other guy. In exchange, and nobody has any food going to anybody. In exchange for those false invoices, Mohammed paid Alif Halal $31,000 and Hoda Abdi $6,400 from the actual Future Leaders bank account. Mohammed then also submitted to Feeding Our Future rosters purporting to list the names of the children who actually got the food at her fake site. As Mohammed knew, those rosters did not accurately reflect the identities and the number of children that were actually fed at all. Between January 21 and July 21, Future Leaders, Mohammed's organization, they also got $850,000 in funds directly from Feeding Our Future. However, only a fraction of these reimbursement funds were actually used to purchase food. Instead, she controlled the Future Leaders bank accounts. She diverted much of those taxpayer dollars to the purchase of real property. Oh, to benefit herself and other companies associated with her. She bought these other with her, including the Minneapolis Autism Center, Future Properties LLC, Fahima Property Group, and the Care Property Group, KR. Not in Kenya, presumably. So she's charged with wire fraud. Here are a couple of details about that. She transmitted an email with the subject line, May 1, 21, Future Leaders Clicker, which was a fraudulent document. Count 2, conspiracy to defraud the United States, saying she did knowingly, willfully, and via a scheme and artifice intend to defraud the United States by cheating the U.S. government out of its money and property. She was deceitful, used dishonest means to impede the lawful functions of HHS and more, and she submitted claims for reimbursement in the amount of $4.6 million on behalf of recipients from whom co-payments were not collected as required. Now, in furtherance of this conspiracy, she also committed the following overt acts. On July 5th, 2025, she was still doing this. Trump's in office now. She's still doing it. Submitted a claim to CCAP for reimbursement of child care services purportedly provided by Future Leaders for Child 1, claiming $900 and saying that she got a $192 copayment. Didn't happen. Then on August 3rd, submitted another claim. She said, I need to be reimbursed $1,200. I got a $100 copayment. No, you didn't. On November 23rd, same thing, saying Child 3 Claimed $900 of reimbursement, got a $98 copayment. No, you didn't. So forfeiture of all ill-gotten gains and all proceeds traceable to these counts should happen. All of her property should be seized, all of her assets frozen, all of her bank accounts ultimately drained as soon as this all happens, so that that money can be returned rightfully to the people of America. Signed on this day via information, Matthew C. Murphy, and she has already been charged and already been indicted on this, as we saw previously. Also charged by criminal complaint. This one occurred back in February, not indictment. And then the affidavit was submitted alleging a lot of the same things, saying she has been the target of this, violating federal programs, and was sponsored by Feeding Our Future, all fraudulently conducted. And so that was the original set of documents. Here's some more here of her actual forms. You see Feeding Our Future, MDE submission verification. She would write program name, Future Leaders. Claim month, September 2018. Printed name, Amy Bach. She just got sentenced for 41 years. We're going to talk about her in the next segment. Filling out all the forms. All right, record seized, saying she was doing a good job. Sponsor transfer e-request. This agent explains. They were also sponsoring other programs. In September, though, Fahima signed a sponsor transfer request form. So the manager of the Future Leaders food site would be under the sponsorship of Feeding Our Future. I switched because I want happening something. We would like to switch sponsors for the following reason. I switch because I want happy. Because I want happy. So she must have been educated at a Leering Center. Sign here by Fahima. So then they got the distribution site, Fraudulent, and said that she served, once again, 27,000 meals to kids over a couple months, claiming to serve 60,000 meals every month. And there were email communications between Amy Bach, who just got sentenced, and another staff member requesting an increase from 500 to 1,000. Here's one email. Here's Amy, founder, executive director of feedingourfuturemn.org, that went from a few $1 million to $200 million over the course of a couple of years because of my COVID. So she says to Corey Flynn, Fahima wants to know if she can increase from 500 to 1,000, double her total expenditures. Amy says, just let her. Maybe sent that from the beach. Stop bothering me, okay? Just let her. They sent in a bunch of forms. And here's another one. Daily meal count. Number of first meals served to children. Every single day, every single kid shows up. These people are not even creative. It's crazy. After school meal counts. Here's the clicker from Feeding Our Future. Supervisor, Fahima. Meal type right here. Number of meals received and prepared, and no surplusage at all. Wild. So they prepared 10,024 meals, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, every single day, the same number of meals. Every single day, every single kid shows up to eat. Number of second meals? Nope, nothing there, because those are not reimbursed. Number of children requesting meals of food, that's gone? No one. All first served children, every single day, everyone shows up. 1024, 1024, 1024, 1024. Amazing. It's like not even real. You just look at that and say, give me a break. Like, kids are sick. Parents can't make it. They're going to grandma's house. They're going to eat there. In April 21 meal counts, she claims to have fed more than 1,000 meals, suppers, and snacks nearly every single day of the month. On every one of those days, the exact number of meals that were prepared that day. That is, there is no day on which her operation prepared more meals than they allegedly distributed. So they got a search of emails, and there was a warrant, and they found that some of the meal counts were also submitted via email. There you go, right there. Fahima sends it into claims, and it's forwarded over. So Fahima has a Hotmail account, sends it over into Cooley, Feeding Our Future. And then they forward it over into the claims department and they process the whole thing from there. So that's how the first charges ultimately dropped. And what were they feeding people? Let's see. They also, here's where they created the fraudulent receipts. So they went over to Abdi and they said, hey, we need some halal food for our kids that we're not feeding. He says, yeah, great. I'll happily pretend to give you halal food that you're not using. Here you go. Is this halal? Well, I guess. Kellogg's Rice Krispies, $1,100. Cheerios, $369. Milk, 1%, $5,500. Jumbo onions, large plum tomatoes, tuna, utility potatoes, orange boxes, jumbo carrots, and Fuji apples, $13,000. Of course, none of that was ultimately going out to anybody. She was fraudulently creating these fake invoices to Alif Halal and forwarding them all in to Feeding Our Future. She got almost $1 million from them in just a short time, about 6 months, and paid a portion of that to Alif Halal because she has to make sure that she keeps him happy. So shout out to this guy, Jared Carey, FBI, who was the guy who ultimately drafted the affidavit. Now she's been hit with additional charges for wire fraud and conspiracy. And so she's in big trouble. Now, it is, I think, something that is much worse than this. This was part of a much broader operation. Fox News, of course, with some other details, fraud and conspiracy. There's the photo. Nick Shirley went over there to have a conversation with her, and the fraudulent claims were just massive, according to Fox. Now, we also saw there was a fraud hearing today. Abe Amadei said Americans are sick and tired of criminals, primarily foreigners, and some of them illegal immigrants, taking advantage of Americans' generosity. That has to end. I'm going to be a big champion for this, and I know this Republican conference is as well, and I appreciate Trump and Vance on this, and Brandon Gill and others. They had an anti-fraud roundtable today in Congress, and here's what it sounded like.
My good friend from Arizona, I'll turn it to you now.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. And thank you, Chairman Lugar and the RFC for putting this on. Thank you, Brandon, for your leadership on this. And Luke, it's a good job. I mean, it's amazing what citizen journalists can actually uncover and where it leads to, because I know that Brandon is serious when he says it's not just going to be hearings after hearings, to be arrests and prosecutions. We have to end this now. I want to start by saying, you know, my family was on food stamps at one point, believe it or not, before they became successful. And they were on it for about a year. That was the intention of food stamps. It was to make a temporary program so to get a leg up as a safety net. And now it's constantly being abused, all of our social welfare system. So what Americans are sick and tired of is that we have these criminals, and primarily foreigners, and some of them illegal immigrants, taking advantage of America's generosity. And that has to end. And I'm going to be a big champion for that. I know this Republican conference is as well. And I appreciate President Trump and Vice President Vance's leadership on the issue as well. But all of this ties, in my opinion, back to election fraud, which we had a roundtable on this before. Why is that? Because if they're willing to steal your money, don't you think they're willing to steal elections to keep that fraud going? So we really have to uncover this. So Chairman Gill, I appreciate you putting this on. I look forward to continued investigations on this, and hopefully we get some justice for the American people and put a stop to this. And by the way, you're not targeting citizens when you just uncover facts and data. What we're uncovering is criminals. And that's the message that we have to take away every single day. So thank you both.
Nice comment. And you want to believe you live in a country that doesn't want your fellow man to starve to death. If you're going to pay taxes for anything, it's like so your friend, your neighbor, somebody you care about can get back on their feet, become a productive member of society, be on food stamps for a little bit, a year, find another job, and then return the favor. Come back, become productive, and pay it forward to the next person who needs it. Not to have pirates come in and ransack the treasury at every turn, robbing from the people who actually need it. Autistic kids, senior citizens, hungry kids, whatever the list is. But now this woman has also been charged. And thank you to Nick Shirley, to J.D. Vance, to President Trump for turning the attention to the people who would violate American integrity for their own nefarious purposes We're going to see what the ultimate conviction looks like. Hopefully when that comes soon, we're going to keep our eye on the docket as it continues to develop and see what the end is in this one particular fraud case, as hopefully there are many more to come. Now, one final update on this topic. And this one's pretty interesting here because I really hope this lady speaks, man, and starts blowing the lid on the whole dang thing. Amy Bach, the so-called mastermind of defeating our future fraud in Minnesota that resulted in $250 million being stolen, is now speaking out. She just got sentenced to 41.5 years in prison. And the day before the sentence was handed down, she sat down for a very long 30-minute interview with KSTP5 from the prison. And she was alerted to her sentencing recommendation that was dropped by the DOJ, saying they're going to ask for 50 plus years and you're going to be going away for a long time. She's saying, I'm just a cog in the machine. There are many other people above me who approved every single reimbursement request, and I brought fraudulent claims to them and they refused to investigate them. They refused to do anything about it. And so although absolutely she deserves to be a part of the penalty phase, and she's going to be prosecuted massively and be sentenced aggressively, as the judge just did today. She wants to appeal. We'll see what happens. But what about the people who are using her, using Mohammed, using Omar, using the rest of them, funneling money to them, knowing it was going to fraudulent and nefarious purposes for their own benefit? I'm talking about Tim Walz, Ilhan Omar, and Keith Ellison, the Attorney General, the people who are the beneficiaries of installing the entire fraudulent scheme. They're just going to be able to say, I didn't know. Well, guess what? Amy Bach is saying, I didn't know. Mohammed is going to say, I didn't know. Omar is going to say, I didn't know. And hopefully they all go to jail and serve the penalties for their fraudulent gains. But now she is speaking out. She sat down for 30 minutes before all of this dropped. We're going to come back to it and listen to segments of it. But Cash is celebrating, saying after the FBI investigation, the mastermind, and she's not claiming to be the mastermind. She's saying, I submitted my receipts up to the government. The government knew it was happening. Tim Walz knew it was happening. They're the masterminds. She's just a cog in the wheel. And now that she has nothing to lose, 41.5 years, I hope she turns and flips on them if the government will allow it. Now, the mastermind behind all of this stole $250 million. She just got 41 and a half years in prison. We're also going to look at the sentencing documents that came down because the DOJ dropped a 21-pager days before she was ultimately sentenced, and she responded with her own sentencing recommendation. That's a 75-pager articulating she didn't know, essentially. And you can't hit her because she wasn't doing this alone. Minnesota, the Department of Education, she says, had reports of program integrity problems all the way going back to April 2020, and they took no actions on this. She says that the total attribution of $250 million to her alone is unfair. There are many other people who need to be rounded up for this. And by the way, I agree completely. She was a drug dealer, not a drug manufacturer. Manufacturers were Ellison, Walz, and Ilhan. So here's the reporting on the sentencing, courtesy of Fox News, on what went down today. We'll take a look at the other documents next.
Our future fraud news. A Minnesota judge has just sentenced the mastermind behind the Feeding Our Future fraud scheme, Amy Bach. She just got more than 41 years in prison. The prosecution is asking for a 50-year sentence and her defense about 3 years. So that's somewhere in the middle that they got that, but closer to what obviously the prosecution wanted. The scheme involved the theft of nearly $250 million in COVID funding. That money was meant to feed hungry children. State leaders claim they were unaware of the fraud. Here's what Amy Bach told our Alexis McAdams from jail back in January.
I honestly believe Keith Ellison and Governor Walz need to be held accountable.
They do, because they were the stewards of the entire operation. It's very convenient for them and for all of the Minnesotans and the Minnesota courts that all blame her for this. Oh, no, she's the mastermind. Well, she had to go get the money from someone. And those entities either knew, she says they did know, or they should have known about the fraud. So rather than allowing Tim Walz and Keith Ellison to just wash their hands of the whole thing, oh, blame Amy for it, they should be held to account. Now, what went down, of course, is she says they knew about the fraud. And we have the documents here that we'll get into in a moment. But here's how some of the interview started, and we'll come back to this in just a bit. It's a long interview, so there's a couple highlights I want to hit.
What is your reaction to that?
Well, that's actually the first time I'm hearing that. So I guess.
So let me back that up. He said, you're going to prison for 50 years.
Obviously, the timing of our conversation is important. You know, Amy, we just learned that prosecutors are asking for you to serve 50 years in prison. What is your reaction to that?
Well, that's actually the first time I'm hearing that. So I guess it's shocking. It's disappointing. It is hurtful.
Do you think you'll have a chance to speak at sentencing? Will you take that opportunity?
I don't know if I'll have a chance. I would absolutely take an opportunity if it's available.
What would you say?
It's a really good question. It's something I've worked through in my head. That this is such a complicated situation, much more so than I think has been shared. There's so many more layers to it than what the public has heard. I, first and foremost, 100% accept the responsibility of things that went wrong. I understand, and I can promise you there's probably no one that's more angry and upset and hurt that fraud occurred within this program than I am. With that being said, at no point in time did I ever intentionally, knowingly allow fraud to happen within the organization. As it stands today, Feeding Our Future remains the only organization and individual that identified actual fraud prior to the federal investigation and said, these claims are fraudulent. These individuals are committing fraud. These invoices are fake. This company we have concerns about. When I reached out for help on how to handle that, we asked the Department of Education if I was allowed to terminate them, if I was allowed to place them on a disqualified list, if I could find them seriously deficient, and was told no, I was not. So we then reached out to the Attorney General's office,
Keith Ellison,
who asked initially, like, oh, what aren't you happy with as regard to their answer? And we said, we need guidance. We haven't seen something of this magnitude. We're not sure how to proceed. And in response to that, we got an email from an MDE staff member simply saying, our attorney asked us to write, and MDE takes no position on fraud. These are decisions that you need to basically work with your attorney and your team and determine how to handle.
But you sued MDE and quite publicly accused them of improperly restricting the activity of your organization and those that you sponsored.
That was not what the lawsuit was about. The lawsuit was about processing of applications. And so what was happening is
But you wanted them to be processed, is essentially what you were asking.
The process being approved or denied, because we were under pressure from the sites and receiving threats of litigation on our end that they weren't receiving answers, because the law allows 30 days for approval or denial, and then appeal rights if there's a denial. And so the entire purpose of that lawsuit was to get them moving. We had asked for access to the application, and we're not being granted access. And all we were saying is allow us to apply. If you look at the stipulated agreement from December of 2020, it was that MDE would process applications in a timely manner. Process meaning approve or deny. They just needed to do something.
Got it. And forgive me, I'm not going to ask you to relitigate it all, but I appreciate that context. I've read some of the recent interviews with you that were published, the Post, the Sahan Journal here locally, and I feel like you've been pretty candid. So I feel like I can ask you this. Certainly, there's no, reason to be diplomatic at this point. Give me your top 5 most responsible for this food fraud scandal.
Well, I think first and foremost, the individuals that were committing the fraud need to be held responsible. It's been really frustrating sitting here watching individuals come through that I terminated, that I identified as committing fraud, and they're sentenced to a couple of years.
How about those? How about uncharged individuals? If we set aside those, other 78 defendants. I know you've mentioned some pretty prominent folks, but who do you hold up as being those who could have stopped this?
Well, I would question why the MDE staff, when we told them about fraud, and they made the decision to move them to another organization and allow them to keep going, why have they not been held accountable? They can't say they didn't know. I told them, I gave them the documents, I showed them the proof, and they disregarded it and moved them. I question why there's been no accountability on that part, on them. I question why the Attorney General's office and no one within that organization has been held accountable.
Keith Ellison.
Again, we alerted them. We said, we have fraud. What do we do? And we didn't get a response. And as the state government that is responsible for this program, they are certainly responsible for what happened. Additionally, we know, and the documents show, if you look at the indictments, if you look at the plea deals, even if you go back and look at the search warrants, roughly 40% of the money that has been accused as fraudulent did not go through Feeding Our Future. It went through another sponsor. Why has nobody from that organization been held accountable? That loss is being attributed to me. That's being calculated into my sentencing, into my restitution. Those individuals, the vast majority of those that are indicted, I either never worked with, had actively terminated, or we had active open investigations into. There were a handful that we missed, and I acknowledge that, and I own that. There were things that we did not see. There were, until the feds and the FBI investigated and some of these things came out, I had no comprehension of the number of layers of players that these individuals. I think,
Amy, some would hear you say that and say, how could you have not known how insane these numbers had become?
Well, I would say there was a few things that happened. One, in hindsight, I agree with you completely. At the time, there was such a need. When my staff were going out to sites, they were seeing lines of people around buildings. They were seeing pallets of food being distributed. And so what was being reported back from the team was that there was this large need. Additionally, when we submit an application, it goes to the Department of Education. We don't have information on what other sponsors are doing. So we only know what our sites within our organization are operating. We submit to the department, this is the address, this is the number of meals, this is the times. They have the full picture. And so when they're approving it, I'm also trusting that they're taking into account the number of sites around, what other sponsors are doing, and looking at that. As Feeding Our Future grew, and if you look at the numbers, we were in the process of closing sites, in decreasing the size of sites. One, because the number of sites we had were increasing, but secondarily, as we were transitioning back to normal operations, the need was decreasing.
Amy, with all respect, we saw the text messages with you and your staff saying you were going to take over the world, or you said maybe at least Minnesota. What about those who say they didn't get the impression that you were interested in getting smaller rather than bigger?
Well, one, as far as the wording of the messages, I am a very sarcastic, joking person. Those were meant in jest. And I think most of us have things on our phones, comments that could be taken out of context and made to seem as though it's something nefarious. It was meant in jest. It was meant in fun. Now, with that being said, you can look at the numbers. In the weeks prior to the execution of the search warrants, MDE, that I know of, has not released it, but there were numerous sites that were closed. As well as if you compare the number of sites that are approved, which I know is a high number, versus the number that actually claimed, there's a large discrepancy, because we would get sites approved and then we would either close them or we never allowed them to start for one reason or another.
Thank you for that. I just want to take a step back because I know our time's a little bit limited.
All right, let's jump ahead a little bit because there's a good exchange here at about 19 minutes.
It's interesting that all of the sites have been from one community. There were other sites that had similar numbers that were of other backgrounds, other descents. None of them have been indicted, not invited. I think it's interesting.
Can you give me an example or two? Like, where did the prosecutors miss? Where did the feds miss? What are these other communities?
There were a number of Asian sites. There were a number of Hispanic operated sites that were doing large numbers. Not ones that we had caught per se, but certainly ones that were doing, providing large numbers of meals. I guess I grasp at straws trying to identify and figure out how this has all become my fault solely. Like I said, I understand that I am responsible. I accept that I submitted claims that were fraudulent, but I'm not the only one. Those same claims were approved by the state agency.
Well, and to be fair, they've charged 79 people, and they've gotten convictions on 65 of them. I think you'd be hard-pressed to say you're the only one being held responsible, would you?
I would say at any sort of a managerial level, yes. We've not seen anyone else from a sponsorship. We've not seen anyone from a government agency. And I'm not the only one that missed it.
That's right. And the people who are approving this hand over fist all are still walking around free. So she'll go to jail for 41 years, or prison rather. We'll see what the sentences are for the other people who were also involved in the fraud. But she is presumably in possession of a lot of information about the higher ups in the government who always claim innocence. They always say they had no idea. It's not their responsibility. We'll just make this one woman the scapegoat, move on, wash our hands of the whole thing, and say that we solved the fraud problem because they got the one person. So obviously more charges are coming down. We got now 15 more people today. He identified 78 others, and hopefully it continues to work its way up the chain because a lot of it is political. A lot of it goes to the beneficiaries of Keith Ellison, of Tim Walz. Now they're all playing dumb. They all were getting the political benefit of this massive fraud, and they should be held accountable too. So a couple of documents hit before the sentencing came down. Here's what the DOJ had to say. saying, here's our position. They said on March 19, 2025, last year, federal jury found her guilty of carrying out a massive fraud scheme, a scheme of unprecedented scale in this country. The ripple effect are profound, immeasurable, and will have lasting consequences. This became the largest COVID fraud scheme in the United States. The brazen and staggering nature of her crimes are leaving lasting damage, and it permanently altered the state. So you must send a clear message to her. Anyone who might exploit state and federal safety net programs needs to be hammered, and she got hammered. Saying she deliberately exploited a children's program to feed hungry kids and enriched herself, her co-conspirators, and more. Another co-conspirator said Amy was a god, and saying that there was a banquet hall that was purchased with the very fraud. Saying Feeding Our Future was a sham organization from the outset. A lot of evidence was presented at trial. She maintained complete control of the program and was overseeing millions of dollars. Some people got $1 million check after $1 million check. Crazy. Signed here by Amy Bach. Look at that. Safari Restaurant or Cosmopolitan, $1.4 million. Wild. Early in the pandemic, widespread vulnerability and pleas to, quote, flatten the curve through social distancing created a total frenzy. She led the scheme. She recruited participants and created the fraud. The individuals are responsible for their own conduct. They're going to be held accountable too. And many co-conspirators were particularly drawn into the fraud. Dozens of co-conspirators were given the chance to once again exploit kids. All of it completely reprehensible. And we're not trying to excuse any of her conduct. We're just pointing out the fact that her conduct, she was enabled by the government there. For 21 months, she submitted thousands of fraudulent reimbursement claims. The funds were then spent extravagantly. Her co-conspirators caused more than $242 million in losses. She always had a workaround. They say she took substantial steps to make sure the flow of the funds was not cut off, aggressively pushing for-profit restaurants and more. And MDE was questioning her. And when she says, when MDE raised concerns about the sites, she responded with excuses, criticized the program and staff, and made additional demands. Rather than addressing the issues, she attacked MDE. Okay, so now I guess the DOJ is saying the MDE was looking into her and she was pushing back against them. Saying, I equally hope MDE understands that the one and only reason is allegations of racism will not be sprawled across the news tomorrow because of your efforts. It's only because Amy and I have confidence in your professionalism. And that question to me is racist, I guess is what she was saying. While the facilities that my clients operate may not be as nice as what you're used to, it doesn't make them any less equal. And was also saying we're going to hit him with defamation and get the F out of here. And so this contrasts a little differently than her demeanor up during that interview. Saying this was going to Safari Restaurant. This site is being staffed by Feeding Our Future. We'll prepare a bunch of meals. She lied to the MDE to circumvent new requirements. In the fall of 2020, Feeding Our Future filed 2 separate lawsuits against the MDE. We heard her explain those, talking about racial discrimination and improper stop funding. Said they operated like a cash pipeline. They got $18 million. She did what was ever necessary to keep the bank open. Countless examples of her being questioned about site discrepancies by Minnesota. Please double check. This is correct. We have verified this is a different youth being served at each one of the locations. Here's a photograph of one of the locations where meals are going out. Once again, it's the same fraud. 1955, 1955, 1955, every single day, every single kid shows up, and they all are getting fed, allegedly. Testimony at trial showed that her employees, including Ikra Mohammed, Hadith Ahmed, and others, made participation in the food program a pay-to-play scheme. Despite her own self-serving testimony that she was working to detect fraud, she knew it was happening. She did nothing to stop it. Someone sent her an email. We took a lot of organizations that don't work with CARES and children. They have no interest with children. These are things we need to clean up. She said, yes, I agree. Another $330,000 check went out to a media group. Another consulting firm, $183,000 got paid from her. And looks like Bach got $1 million cash kickback. Wild. So she was getting kickbacks from Feeding Our Future, orchestrating sham transactions to Goodwill with other business equipment. And here's a text message. We may have become the mob. It's true. The whole city is, the whole state. Goal is to make Feeding Our Future nationally recognized. Mission accomplished on that one. In this year, since her conviction, she's used the media to deny criminal culpability. She gave an interview from CBS News. She took zero accountability. She said she was a scapegoat. She denied being the mastermind. She said, if I had done this, I would have pled guilty. Saying she took egregious steps and said she wasn't supposed to be convicted at trial. And so the Star Tribune was also publishing fraud warnings. The reporter repeatedly referenced in interviews that the MDE witnesses did with the FBI during their investigation. They had screenshots of the reports. And so for all of those reasons, she should be hit with a maximum penalty. She was an organizer. She was a leader. Nature and circumstances of the offense. She was ripping off kids, knew about the fraud. She's a smart person, went to college, previously worked at a daycare. COVID-19 was an exploitable event. She still denies responsibility, essentially to this day, was doing it the day before her sentence. She says in the interview she's going to appeal it, but they ultimately hit her with a 50-year in prison recommendation. She got 41 and a half of those. And she's still saying that people much higher up in this whole scam knew about it, and they were essentially working together. So we go down to page 16, where she talks about other people that were involved in this. And let's continue on. She details for us, this is her sentencing guideline recommendation. And here is where we about get to it. The methodology is unreliable. Chart below indicates many of the steps the government should have taken to determine the cost of the meals. So kind of quibbling about the total amount. And post notice of fraud payments by MDE breaks the causal chain, saying she needs to be the one causing the loss. But she wasn't the cause of the loss. Many actors outside of her control were making the payments. MDE was notified of the fraud, but failed to take action to prevent it. These people recruited the sites intended to commit fraud. Unbeknownst to her, this connection means that she can't be the one solely responsible for it. And they apparently had concerns about the program integrity, but they didn't take any action. Their failure to act despite knowledge of the program integrity negates the claim that she bears the sole responsibility for this amount. Saying the court emphasized obligations that the state agencies have to follow under federal law. State agencies must adopt fraud detection and investigation programs that meet federal standards. They must, at the state level, conduct preliminary investigations once they receive complaints about the fraud. If the investigation provides a reason to believe that there is fraud, there then needs to be a full investigation. Other case law supports that. The decision notes that maladministration or corruption in one part of an agency could be responsible for the allocation of the funds. Agencies have a duty to address fraud, and the government didn't. Here, MDE's own employees like Emily Honer and this person raised concerns about the fraud as early as April 2020, but MDE took no action. And new records also reveal that officials failed to act on fraud warnings. The Star Tribune posted about it. MDE was aware of the fraud, but again, refused to take action. Now, even though she notified them of the fraud, it didn't act as a normal state agency would. It is undeniable that MDE contributed to the increase in the loss amount because MDE management directed MDE employees stop investigating the fraud. Fraud was formally reported to the FBI in 2021. Biden's FBI, they did nothing about it. The government now seeks to attribute $100 million, at least $98 million, of the loss from April 20 to January 20th to her. That loss amount MDE could have prevented, but they paid it out after notice of the problems. Those payments cannot automatically be attributed to her. Once MDE had notice or suspicion of fraud, its decision to continue to disperse the funds reflects its own independent choices, including reconfiguring its claims processing system to bypass the safeguards, auto-processing every claim without human review, continuing to pay for 9 months after the referral to the FBI without issuing a single deficiency notice. And many of their claims were the responsibility of the MDE, not the sponsor. citing Code of Federal Regulations, which defines what their responsibilities are. Case law says they have to also investigate, saying their evidence only identifies personal proceeds of $5.2 million. $243 million is way more than she's responsible for. Should be closer to like $8 million. The PSR also doesn't specify any amount appropriated by her, the pre-sentence report. If the government can only trace $5 million in proceeds from a $243 million scheme, the loss figure is not 243. So now we're talking about numbers and cents. Now, again, what would be a fair sentence? She says it should be much less than that, saying we did distribute some food, we did distribute some rent. And so, honestly, the whole thing is just filled with bad actors. There's like no hero in this story at all. It's just fraud through and through. She walks us through the entire trial. But my point is, we want the people at the top to face some accountability for all of this. 45-year-old first offender. The rest of her sentencing recommendation is here. You can see it's a big 75 pager. And in conclusion, she wanted a sentence of 37 months, which she didn't get, followed by supervised release with mental health treatment and time served. So let her out now and just put the whole thing behind her. So it's just fraud. And I have, not a lot of sympathy for her other than the idea that she'll be the end of it. We definitely don't want that to happen. Although I don't think that will happen because we had a bunch of additional people, 15 others, all charged. And so at some point, hopefully somebody has the evidence of the people who were signing off on her payments, right? She didn't go rob a bank for $243 million. She didn't go take a gun up to somebody and said, give me the money. They gave her the money. They knew where it was going. And people inside the government, they always claim, whether it's with elections or fraud or whatever, oh, it's oversight. We had no idea that there were duplicate or triplicate ballots. We had no idea that $250 million was being funneled out of there. And so I don't know why she didn't flip harder. In the interview, they asked her about it. They said, why didn't you flip? She said, well, they were always going to make me plead guilty, which, of course, that's the whole, I don't know what her lawyers were telling her, but yeah. Finger somebody else higher up the chain. Maybe she doesn't have anything. Maybe she does. But now, since she's got 50 plus years, she did say she'll appeal it. And ultimately, that sentence was handed down by a Trump judge right here. Seems like it was Nancy E. Brassel for the District of Minnesota, to whom the case is assigned. Seen here. And let's do a refresh to see if the docket updated on this, because it had not updated this afternoon. No, nothing there. So, of course, she's going to prison for a very long time. She will appeal it. Likelihood of it getting reversed, probably low, but you never know. Alec Murdaugh got his case reversed. But Tim Walz and the shucks, I had no idea. And Keith Ellison, the same guy who was endorsing a lot of the ICE agent attacks in Minnesota, I think have a lot more culpability than they're letting on to. And it would be nice if the government officials responsible for enabling the whole scheme were held accountable for America getting ripped off of hundreds of millions of dollars going back into little Somalia, Minnesota. We're going to see if there is more to come on this and when the actual government officials are indicted, hopefully one day soon. But thank you for joining us as we keep our eye on the massive fraud that continues throughout America. And we'll see you back here on the next one. All right, so friends, very interesting day. Lots of Minnesota today. Very glad you're here. If you're just getting here, quick recap. We talked about this dude who is now on the loose, the fleeing fraudster felon, jumped out of a 4-story window and now has a bum ankle. See him hopping and skipping around over there. Ooh, oh, that hurts. That's okay. He's got a couple $1 million. He can find a good doctor and then have a nice time and a trip back to Kenya, apparently. So we went through that story, read through his charges, took a look at those. He got $3.2 million along with another dude named Abdi. We also saw that the Nick Shirley lady, this woman right here, Fahima Mohammed, she also got charged, looked at her documents, another $4 million on that one that has been siphoned out of the American Treasury, once again for daycare and food. She was a part one of the underlings of Feeding Our Future. She just got charged with more crimes. And then, of course, Amy Bach, who is saying there's layers and layers to this, and got sentenced to 41 years in prison. We'll see if the other people get 41 years or anything close to that when the time comes. But now, my friends, it is time to hear from you. And let's see what you say about all of this and more. I saw some other comments. It's a little too much Minnesota today, which I can understand. But there were other stories out there. And one of the other stories was about the DNC story and the DNC thing. And I thought about covering that, but I don't think it's really worth it. And here's what it looks like. You can see it's 192 pages. And many people who've actually read it are saying that the DNC kind of post-mortem was empty. There's nothing really in there. Nothing about why Kamala Harris was the candidate without an election. Nothing about the Joe Biden debate. It's about a bunch of money, essentially. Look how much money we spent. Look how much money the Republicans spent, all here. And the document actually argues with itself, right? More money, attorney general spending. They go through a bunch of races, hard and soft races, total spenders. It's like a money report, largely boring, not that interesting. If you're wondering, what's going on in the reports, this is what it looks like. All this money, Republicans spent this, blah, blah, blah. And they argue with themselves. So the guy who wrote the report didn't talk about really any policy issues. Sourcing not provided. It's all FEC data. This is it. All party fundraising, inflation adjusted. It's all finances. I was like, well, we're going to cover it, but I'm like, this is boring as hell. So House fundraising cycle. We're now on page 116. More money, more money, more money. A note on self-funders. Some more bar charts. The GOP's victory came down to its ability to learn from Obama more than Democrats. Despite the end result in 24, technology could be seen, thanks to donors who provided the seed money for system modernization and capital improvements. We then began to use new technical toolkits, analysis not supported by source material. So they marked it up. Whoever authored this marked it up. Somebody else marked it up. No sourcing provided for many claims in this section. It's like a disaster. Voter registration, no evidence or data provided for many claims in this section. Sourcing not provided, sourcing not provided. And I don't think there's even any issues in here, right? It's paid programming. We're now on page 77. Widening the aperture, an incumbent vice president. We needed to re-engage and target various constituency groups. Pulling people into the group. Foreign policy were good issues. Abortion, economy. There's some issue stuff from an exit poll. That's after the election. Negative messaging, no sources. All screens are not the same, no sources. So this is it. More money. How much you were spending. Democrats invested 60% in broadcast and cable. Okay, so it's going to be the Joe Rogan problem. Presidential ad spending. We're now on page 39. More money, more money. So that's it. Geographic pattern, urban cores. Talking about demographics, men and women, urban areas, different swing states. That's the whole report. We just read it. We're on page 15 now. And there's Kev McCarthy, and what a disgusting image that is. All right, so that's the full report. You can see it, 192 pages. I really don't think there's anything even interesting in there, which is why we didn't cover it, but I saw some comments about it, so I just wanted to flag it for you in case you were interested. But nothing about the Joe Biden debate, as far as we know. Nothing about having a demented, brain-dead president for 4 years, about how that might have had a problem in their electoral chances. Nothing about throwing him out at the last minute after he fell on his face during the campaign debate. Nothing about Kamala Harris being inserted as one of the worst candidates ever, which is good. If they're not going to do a post-mortem on Kamala, maybe she'll run again. Be good for all of us. Hey, so my friends, thank you for being here. Thank you for the donos. Happy Thursday. Appreciate you being here. Rick D said, Lisa Monaco, remember her she was Merrick Garland's number 2 in the DOJ, said had been referred to the DOJ, but not for what most people thought she should be referred on. And here it was about Microsoft. Former Deputy AG under Biden has been referred to the DOJ for breaching or covering up investigations into Microsoft's cybersecurity breaches. Interesting. Yeah, she's a bad, bad hombre right there. Was covering up for Hunter Biden, was approving all of the attack vectors on the president. So she needs to be added to the list of indictees. Hey, Tim Jake. Some may call him Tim. Thank you, Tim. Colorado Democrats, I saw this, censured Governor Polis, the gamer governor from Colorado, for commuting Tina Peters' sentence, barring him from all official party functions. Some Democrats are even calling for his impeachment over the commutation. He's standing his ground. Yeah, we appreciate that. Yeah, we appreciate that. Tim Jake in the house. And thank you, Tim, for the nice dono. Yeah, and honestly, we appreciate Governor Polis for that. Like, he did the right thing. And it was even law across the board. He identified the other lady who got probation for the same felony charges. Tina Peters got 9 years. That's not equal justice. So Polis did the right thing, and we appreciate him. But yeah, the Democrats, you cannot betray their orthodoxy, right? J6 is like the sacred issue for them. They still are. There's no evidence of election fraud. Okay. Have you watched even like 5 minutes of this channel? We've covered it for years now. But they don't want to reconcile it. All right. It's the same people who got like 9 jabs in the neck. Like, they'll never go back and say, okay, maybe we overreacted during COVID. Never. They'll never admit it. And some of that is to their credit. Like, they never waver on their tentpole issues, their load-bearing issues. J6, Fauci, they may still have shrines to Fauci, even though you're like, you know, he created that thing with EcoHealth Alliance in a lab in China. You're like, well, I still want the jabs because I trust the science. You're like, okay, so you're an idiot. Got it. So they can't. That's a betrayal of their faith. J6 insurrection was part of their faith. That's literally how it is. Real Trump said, what's up? Or else we'll put you in jail. Man. Well, yeah, we're going to get a lot more people in Minnesota going to jail, which is all good news because there are fraudsters there. Thank you, Real Trump said, for the dono. We appreciate you. Rick D, what's going on? Hey, John Thune abruptly announced that the Senate is going home until next month sometime. No work on anything. Bet they still hold pro formas, though, so no recess appointments. Absolutely, Rick D. I think you're right about that. We talked about this morning on the members only stream. The Thunes and the rest of the goons in there, they are so mad and bitter that Trump endorsed Paxton over Cornyn that they said no ballroom money for you. No. Even though we also saw that Joni Ernst, the senator, was saying we have $1.3 billion in fraud happening every day. 1.3 billion with a B. Siphoned out every single day. Day, every day. But they can't scrounge around the seat cushions in the Senate and find $1 billion for a ballroom because they're temper tantrum babies in the Senate. Babies. They should be ashamed of themselves. They act like, 14-year-olds. Like I acted when I was 14. I'm going to go pout because I didn't get my way. You're a grown-ass man, John Thune. Act like it. Nick Sorter. Yeah, and so now they're doing the same thing. Oh, no, now you don't. Now it's going to be we might as well have a Democrat Senate because they're acting like Democrats, like literally. Although if I'm not saying that that was a facetious thing to say. Because if they actually are Democrats, they will end the filibuster and pack the Supreme Court. But thank you, Rick D. Hope you're doing well, my friend. Good to see you in the chat. Nick, what's up? Nick Sorter. Yeah, they're going. Yeah, useless. Useless, Rick D. Tank Farm is active, and they are chilling the lines for fueling. IFT-12 Starship launch window opens at 5:30 p.m. Central Time. Did they blast off already? Let's see. Maybe we can catch a blast off. Coverage starts at 6:43 p.m. Eastern Time. Oh, yeah? Well, it's 6:44 p.m. Eastern Time, you punks. So what the hell's going on over there at the AP? See if there's any other... I think SpaceX has a YouTube channel. Let's see. Okay, are we counting down? Let's see. I don't think we're going to get it. Oh, AP just kicked off via SpaceX. So I don't think we're going to get it here, but T-minus 45 minutes. Starship flight happening. Man, this is wild. We're living through wild times. We've talked about this a lot. You know, what do we find out it was? Like from the Orville Wright's initial flight in 1903 to the first World War I military airplane was like 12 years. You can debate the start of the, actual military flights, but about 12 years. Okay, so from Orville sitting on, you've seen the glider essentially, going like 30 feet or whatever, into World War I airplanes was like 12 years. Wild. And the commercial flights were soon after that. So think about this on the same time scale. Like, what if this is 1903 again? Are we going to the moon? Are we going to Mars in the next 10 years? Crazy, dude. It's crazy. Anyways, so just think about that as we watch the launch. And that's pretty good. Pretty cool. All right, so 45 minutes. That will be happening. 44 minutes. Thank you, Rick D, for flagging that for us. Will be a cool one to watch. Divinity, what's up, Divinity? Thank you for rating the stream. Amazing to have you. Thank you, Divinity. And shout out to our Divinity 143 friends who came over and joined us today. What a lovely day. Gauntlet KI. Hey, and Steve Bolin. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for becoming a supporter on your own volition. And we'll see you in the morning on our members only morning stream. Thank you, Steve. What a lovely thing it is. And check out the stream from this morning. We had two good segments this morning. We talked about Graham Plattner, and we talked about the other thing, which was Trump's executive order, which makes it a lot more difficult for illegal aliens to access banking. Thank you, Divinity 143 in the house. And Gauntlet KI, which state and Fed directors are complicit to defraud? It depends how you define fraud, I guess. But I think Keith Ellison and Tim Walz. Tim Walz has to pass a budget. He's responsible for the whole, finances of the state. Keith Ellison is the chief law enforcement officer. And were any other people, like whoever, the director of the Department of Education was, like, who was that person? I don't even know. Who was that person? Maybe they're responsible for it. But it's always a wild situation when there's the government handing out millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. No one in the government is responsible for it at all, but it's the people receiving the money, not the people who get the benefits of the people receiving the money that flow back to them. It's always, the non-officials, because they'll protect themselves and then everybody else just gets screwed. Sharpie guy, do you remember the snake oil salesman on TV that was promoting the miracle chamois named Shamwell? Hell yeah, Vince? You talking about Vince? ShamWows are amazing, by the way. Shamiracle maybe was born about, I think Vince is running for Congress. Shamiracle maybe was born about the same time, and her father, who'd been told he was shooting blanks, found out, what the hell's comment is this? Found out his wife was pregnant when he was watching the ShamWow commercial. Maybe. Maybe. And ShamWow, and he said, man, Sham Miracle. Maybe he was cleaning up a spill. She's like, what do you think is a good baby name, husband? She's like, I don't know. But this ShamWow is like a friggin' Sham Miracle. And they both went, Sham Miracle. Yes, I like it. Says, if you catch my drift, of course this is meant in humor, but how else could anyone come up with their baby's name otherwise? Kind of perplexing, isn't it? Any thoughts, Rob? Well, I don't know. I was asking Alexis about it. Like, what do you think about Sham Gouveia? What do you think? She's like, you're an idiot. We didn't actually have that conversation, but we should. Real Trump said, what's up? Minnesota House Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Policy Committee by Republicans. Chair Kristen Robbins, Vice Chair Rep. Patty Anderson. Are those the people who were on the committee back when all this was going on, or is this a new committee that has been stood up in the aftermath? Man, I don't care if the Republicans are also stealing hundreds of millions of dollars and they know they're involved in it. Round them up. I don't care. Yeah, Republicans, Democrats, Tim Walz. If this is happening, it's our money, man, and we need it now. So we're getting ripped off. Hey, Biltong is here. You know where to go. BiltongUSA.com. Code Robert. You'll save 10% off. Lots of good stuff about it. Mild heat, big flavor, 50% protein. It's called Peri Peri Biltong, and it's BiltongUSA.com. The best place you can get your meats. Hey, 9/11 scholar, until Amy names names, I lack sympathy. I feel that. Yeah, I feel that too. It's easy to just say that you're the victim of all of it. You know, I got attacked. I'm the scapegoat. I'm innocent, blah, blah, blah. But like, help us help you, right? Help us help you. Who do you know? It's almost like the Epstein victims, right? They come out, they're like, well, I'm not going to name anybody. Do you know? Yeah. Will you tell us? No. But I'll name it on my podcast. Oh, you will? Where's your podcast? Can we go subscribe? Actually, I won't name them on my podcast. Okay. Well, you know, every other victim in America needs to name their accuser if you go to the police station, or give us details about who your accuser is. Where did it happen? When did it happen? Where were you? What happened after that? Except some of these Epstein accusers. Not all of them. The new one was, I think, testifying today. Rana Graf, was that the one testifying today? She was a named co-conspirator in the original plea deal, and now she's like, I'm a victim. It's like, okay. All right. So I'm with you on that. You start naming names, and she should start naming names and sharing evidence and explain conversations about it, and, you know, help us. Hey, Tony D, as a reluctant Minnesotan, I appreciate you keeping the big, beautiful spotlight on the fraud. There's a number of Somalis in my town, so I'm keeping my eyes open for a guy in aqua blue shorts with a lip. Yeah, he's not doing hopscotch, okay? He's running from the feds, so give him a call. 1-800-CALL-FBI. Hey, we got a hopscotch in Somali bouncing down the streets over here. He's beep-bopping and booping all over the place. Will you come get him? Putting the FBI on speed dial. Amazing, Tony D. I hope you find him, man. Let us know. Sharpie guy, I didn't tell the joke very well, Rob. Hopefully you can read it up to a better one. Be blessed, watchers. Rob and Alexis. Man, thank you, Sharpie guy. It was a good joke. It might be real. He might have been saying this sham wow is like a sham miracle, and that inspired the birth of their child. You never know. Good stuff. All right, Jim tells you we'll send some friends over your way. Hopefully your streams are going well over there. Lots to talk about. No doubt about that. And we'll have some other updates tomorrow as well, no doubt. But there was a lot of Somali fraud today. I know it's a lot of Somali fraud, even for me. But it's here. Hey, Susan. Yeah, this is why I returned to Minnesota to care for my aging mother. Well, that's a great idea, right? To actually care for somebody, not to steal millions of dollars and then let your aging seniors, your aging parents just rot away in a hellscape thanks to the Somali fraudsters, which apparently happened. Susan, thank you. Thanks for taking care of your mama, man. We love our mamas and our parents, man. Shout out, Susan. You're a good son or daughter, Susan, daughter. Hey, John. Hey, Rob. I have an idea for a new viral video game. It's a Pokemon Go style with facial recognition. You earn points by finding and reporting illegal aliens. But the big points come from a confirmed deportation. All I need is a few million in seed money, a patsy, a CFO of limited intelligence, and all the lawyers. From John. Not a bad idea there, John. Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. You could probably just, what's it called? Vibe code that up pretty quickly. And you need Palantir, I think, too, or Zuckerberg. Very interesting idea. It reminds me remember the Minutemen in Arizona, where they were like securing the border? They got attacked, man. I think they got sued. They were like protests. Like, don't you dare enforce immigration law as a good citizen. Only we can do that, which means just let them all in here. But John, interesting idea. Hopefully you get the funding. If there's any millionaires out there who want to fund a nice, interesting program, it's called Pokemon Illegal. Or it's called Pokegone, Illegal Alien Edition. We need some names. Pretty good name. Hey, what's going on? Amy Ann, has anyone seen Tim Walz lately? Maybe he too went to Kenya. Man, I don't know. Yeah, it's a good question. He has been awfully quiet lately. So has Ilhan Omar. Yeah, not wanting to talk too much about anything. Oh, and I forgot to play a little Ilhan Omar. So here's what she got asked as of today.
You have not investigated anything. Here's her. Watch. House Republicans looking into the net worth of you and your husband. Are you cooperating with that investigation and providing the documents?
Looking into anything. They're just saying those things to get interviews with you guys. There's nothing really happening.
They're saying it's a red flag.
Investigated anything. He hasn't done anything. He hasn't referred me to anybody. He's just saying that so he can get TV interviews because you guys will only talk to them if they say something about me.
Says you haven't investigated anything, Chairman. It's basically all for attention.
Yeah, she's delusional and she knows better. She's trying to say she made a mistake on her financial disclosure form. No one makes a $30 million mistake on your financial disclosure form, especially if you don't have any assets. You know, if you're Donald Trump or some very wealthy person, 30 million might be a rounding error. But for someone who alleges now she has nothing, that's a pretty big rounding error. And it all stems around two basic things, the problem she has. First of all, she asked for an earmark for a project that was later proven to be a fraudulent project that was involved in that Somali scam up there. And then secondly, she claimed her assets were huge because of this winery that we know has been shut down that, according to rumors and press reports, was defrauding investors.
Yeah, Congressman, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. We'll continue looking into this, as you will.
All right, and there was another one from her. She is something else. And here in this one, so TMZ is now back in D.C. Nick Sorter clipped this one, courtesy of TMZ. And listen to her. She just says it's all about racism and bigotry.
This is just a made-up lie because you do not investigate someone for 10 years and not come up with anything.
So then why do you think it's still being talked about?
Because these people are disgusting. They believe in weird, creepy things, and that's why they want to believe in this weird.
And
that's all I will say.
No, definitely. Why do you think, I guess, that you're being targeted then? It's
because they're racist, xenophobic. I just happen to be Muslim, and I don't think you're allowed to continue from there. But,
okay. Understood.
Yeah, I mean, they're just disgusting, bigoted people, and that's all I gotta say.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Disgusting, bigoted, racist people who don't like Muslims. That's a representative from Somalia, Minnesota. So anyways, that's what we're dealing with out there. And if you have, I guess, any oversight, if she makes a problem about a $30 million fraudulent financial report, you're a bigot if you ask questions about it. If you have questions about her winery, which she suddenly wrapped up after all of his fraud stuff started to burst through the scene, you're xenophobic. If you have questions about $200 million that got siphoned out of the federal treasury courtesy of mostly Somalians, it's because you're a racist. That's Ilhan Omar, and that's Minnesota. So, all right. So, friends, it's been a beautiful stream. Thank you for joining us and subscribing to our channel. And, of course, returning back here tomorrow when we get into it again. Want to shout out some friends over on X. Neuro D in the house. Thank you for linking our watchingthewatchers.locals.com. That's the web address if you want to join us on our members-only morning stream or on YouTube as well. And Darby Shaw, man, thank you, Darby, for this. As a special needs mama, man, shout out to our special needs mamas out there, man. So is my mama. We love our brother Joey. I can't even begin to express how furious Medicaid fraud makes me, but it's not just the fraudsters. DMEs bill Medicaid 3 to 4 times the cost for prescription supplies that I can literally buy online. Yeah, and I mean, what kind of a sick freak person do you have to be to steal from disabled kids? Seniors who are dying, you let die? Like, it's a different type of, I don't know. I don't even know what it is. I'd say it's a different type of ethical makeup, but it might be deeper than that. It might be a spiritual problem. Jury nullification. It is a DC court after all. Jury acquits 2 business executives of bribing Navy admiral for government contracts. Interesting, B-Torn. I did not see that one. Thanks for flagging it. And I'll let Andrew tell you all about how long this fountain just had its repairs, been out of service. Starts at 255. The Meridian Hill fountain is now fixed in DC. I saw that, B-Torn. I've not been over there yet, but it looks like a beautiful fountain. And I think that was the one that like Malcolm X was standing on or something. Yeah, very interesting. Thank you, B-Torn, for the comments. And hey, Deborah Myers. What's up, Deborah? 32 months. Thank you for being here for so long. Wow, been here a long time. Love it, man. Thank you, Deborah. We love that you're here. Thank you for supporting us. We've been through a lot together over these 32 months. Hopefully many more to come. And we're grateful to have you here. Another one says, keep up the good work. I'm still sitting here. Take it all in. I don't say much, but I love the Watcher fam. We love you back, Deborah. Thank you for the donos today. Keep up the good work, Rob. You're doing great. Thank you, Deborah. Man, I appreciate those words of encouragement. Yeah, we're having fun. Hopefully we're doing good. I know there's a lot to cover. We try to do a good job. I want you to like the show and keep coming back. And I want you to enjoy it, learn something, have some fun, make some friends, meet some people. And the idea is we all walk away with a little bit more intelligence. We learn something. We've got some good energy. And we stay engaged in the process because we have a beautiful country. And we want to save this puppy, and we're going to. So, all right, friends, it's been an awesome stream. Thank you, Deborah, again, for being here for so long. Thank you, Membos. And yeah, Vince. Vince, baby. This guy. A ShamWow commercial. That's amazing. I don't want to get a copyright strike. Let me open this up real quick. See if we got any tunes on this.
With the same high-tech material used to make surgical masks.
All right, little tunes in the background, but here's what it looks like. ShamWows are now machine washable. Don't use your disposable mask. When did this come out? 9 months ago. Amazing. So that's Vince. That's the ShamWow guy. Probably the inspiration for Sham Miracle. Thank you for that one. Those were funny. Remember, he also had the slap chop. Slap these nuts. Remember that? Oh, gosh. All right, I'll buy 2. So, all right, that was a lot of fun. Thank you for that. Donut mind me. And friends, we'll pause here for the evening. It has been a beautiful stream. Happy Thursday. Happy to come back tomorrow. It's going to be a Friday. Looking forward to it. Thank you to our awesome mods and meme smiths. Big thank yous to Donut Mind Me. We got John in the house. We've got Muffin Rando, of course, K-Bean in the chat, Carrie B clipping for us in the morning. We got Neuro D, Janek, Dog Digger over on the Rumbles. We got Geegum Geegum, Elliot, and just Rhonda, keeping things nice and orderly and beautiful around here. And friends, thanks for hitting the like button on the way out. We're going to send you over to Jim Tells You if you're on YouTube. Otherwise, we're coming back here tomorrow, and we're going to get into it again. And in order to do all of this appropriately, we are going to need to see you right back here so that together, with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night. Sleep very, very well. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching, my beautiful friends. Now it's that time where the stream must end. You brought the heat with every chatting line. Together we expose corruption. One more time we dove in the truth where the media hides. Lit up the lies with receipts on all sides. The fight isn't over, but we made them sweat.